Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back in day, talk about Oshi no Ko, chapter number 159. This chapter is titled Resonance. And let me just say this, we know that we are in for a doozy of a chapter. Anytime, whenever you open up the chapter, of course, I read Oshi no Ko off of Manga Plus, the Shueisha sort of Jump Plus English website that they put out and make, being that Oshi no Ko isn't on the Viz or the Shonen Jump app, which, I mean, makes sense since it's a Young Jump title, but I digress, and it's not like Viz got the rights to publish it in English either, being that those rights are held by Yin Press, but either way, through everything I just said, we know that we are in for a doozy of the chapter. Whenever we open up the chapter on Manga Plus, and the first thing that pops up is a content warning. And that is because, yes, this chapter does deal with a lot of deep and dark topics, as this content warning just pretty much reads like, hey, this chapter contains depictions of suicide and suicidal thoughts, which may be distressing to some readers. If you or someone you know is struggling, please call or reach out for somebody to help. In the U.S., you can call or text the Suicide Crisis Lifeline at 988. And it also pretty much says, like, hey, for international resources, please visit findahelpline.com or betrenders.org. So, and I definitely support all of that, what they just said there. If you or somebody you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts or anything like that, please go check out these websites. As we all know, nobody wants you to go away. Everybody wants you to stay around with them. So, yeah, that's a little my piece on this, but yeah, this chapter is a doozy, because of course we all know what happened last time in Oshi no Ko, and if you didn't read last week's chapter, I don't know why you're watching this video first off, so we're just going to get into spoilers right away, because Ruby apparently got stabbed, and I say apparently because we will find out that is completely wrong as we dive into this chapter. But yeah, so Ruby apparently got stabbed on Christmas Day last chapter, as we got a whole chapter pretty much about, like, the whole big deal of, hey, as I titled the video, like mother, like daughter, because we see that Ruby is being very successful being an idol, and we also saw that Nino was having some struggles with Ruby surpassing I, being that I is the best idol, right? But with all of that said and done, I think we just need to hop into this chapter where we pretty much see that Ruby has gotten stabbed. And our first panel here is, of course, Nino, who we do fully realize as the stabber, is standing there, and she's got the knife in Ruby's torso, right? And Ruby is just like, as she sort of breathes out, and all of a sudden, Nino just starts to pull the knife out, and she just says, like, hey, I'm sorry, Ruby. She says, you must never surpass I. Of course, we know this has been Nino's whole motivation this whole time. This is nothing surprising, right? And Nino just continues to pull the knife out, and she just says, like, hey, everything we would have done would have been completely pointless if I wasn't number one. And she's like, and so would everyone's death. And that's why, as Nino finishes pulling the knife out of Ruby's stomach, because of course, that is one of the big things with knife wounds. If you end up stabbing somebody, not that you should go out and be like, oh, hey, I see that guy over there, let me try stabbing him. That's what you should do. But if you do stab someone, if you leave the knife in there, that sort of blocks up all of those, the knife wound that you've just made pretty much. But the second you take the knife off, that's sort of when, like, the blood vessels that you have severed start to bleed openly, and it gets a whole lot worse once the knife comes out. Like, if you've ever, like, gotten an accident, like, I've never been in a farm-related accident, but I know a few farmers who have, and something that saved their life is whenever they get a knife stuck in them, what they'll do is they will head to the emergency room, but leave the knife in there and only take the knife out once in the emergency room and once around medical professionals, right? Instead of just bleeding out, it sort of helps to block up all of that blood, right? I'm getting to say all of this because as Nino removes the knife from Ruby's side, she sees that there's no blood on the knife at all. And Nino realizes this and goes like, huh? And all of a sudden, Ruby, who we will find out in a second isn't actually Ruby, she goes and she pretty much grabs Nino's shoulders and lifts her up, as all of a sudden, Saito comes up from behind and grabs Nino, turns her around, and shoves her on the ground in like some military-grade action movie stuff, right? As Saito just begins to scream out like, hey, are you stupid? There's no way I'll make the same mistake again and again. Sort of being like the whole criticism of last chapters, like, is Saito and Miyako and all of these people really that stupid, like Aqua too, like not to protect Ruby on the day of this magnificent concert, like everything going on here? Like, are they just completely stupid? And no, they aren't. They actually had this planned out the entire time. As we eventually see that Ruby, who we actually learn is Akane, takes off their wig and pretty much reveals that they're Akane, as we see that they're sort of just wearing that dress, and they really had that whole Ruby look going on, mainly because of, I think, the star eye syndrome that, of course, we get with these characters, but of course we know that Ruby, of course, has the star guns, but also we've seen Akane manifest them at certain points as she sort of gets into her acting mode, so it makes sense why she was able to pull that look off, right? As she's just like, yeah, I was just wearing a knife-proof vest, so she was wearing some good old Kevlar under her shirt there, so the knife wasn't able to actually get through, and behind Ruby in the apartment, we see two other characters. We see an older guy with some glasses, and he got some stubble. And we see, like, a younger girl, maybe the same age as, like, Akane and the rest of these guys. But we don't really know what's up with that quite yet. I don't know her exact identity, right? But at this point, Nino is just laying on the ground, right? And, of course, she's just been... her plan has completely been foiled by Ruby, or not by Akane, not by Ruby, because as we'll learn in a second, Ruby is currently not here, right? Well, actually, Saito says this in the exact next panel, as he just says, like, hey, Ruby already left for the site and started preparing for the concert, right? And Nino's just like, hey, President, how have you been recently, right? And Saito's like, Nino? And he's like, you? And he's like, was this your revenge on I? And we see that Nino goes quiet for a second, right? And eventually, Saito just speaks up again. He's like, hey, I knew that you were in some sort of contact with your fans back in the day, and I also knew that you were dating one of your fans, Ryusuke Shugano, which, of course, as we know, is the original murderer of I, and also was the person who, well, we know that Ryusuke murdered Goro. My bad, I'm sorry. This is like right after I woke up in the morning, and I normally film my videos like a few hours after I wake up, but I don't have time today, so sorry if my voice is a little bit off. I'm trying to work through getting more awake as the day goes on, if you know what I'm saying, right? But Saito just says, like, hey, we knew we were dating one of your fans, Ryusuke. Of course, Ryusuke murdered Goro. Ryusuke murdered I, and we eventually know that Ryusuke murdered himself. And we now know, oh, Ryusuke was also dating Nino. Interesting little twist there, right? And Saito just continues on saying, like, hey, I was aware that your boyfriend, who is supposed to be your biggest fan, had secretly switched his idol to I, and that you were sick and tired of it. And he's like, it must have been rough to watch the man you loved become so obsessed with I to the point where he would even kill her. But he eventually just like starts as like, but we don't get what he was about to continue on with, as Nino just starts to say, like, hey, you're wrong, Prez. I have forgiven Ryosuke-kun. I was the #1 idol in the world. It'd be weird if he didn't come to like her. Besides, when I told him to die, he obeyed me just like that. As we really get the disturbing image in this channel, in this chapter, as we see Nino, a young Nino, walk into a room, and we see that she's crying, as in this room, there's a noose tied from the ceiling, and we see that Ryosuke is in the noose right there. Yeah, this is deeply disturbing, and the whole thing that Nino's trying to get across here is that she's about to explain herself, so I'm just going to continue on with the chapter, and then we're going to just stop to talk about this, because this is a very deep topic, as like I just got into earlier. So Nino just continues like, hey, when I told him to die, he obeyed me just like that. This isn't about revenge or anything like that. My heart had been completely stolen by I, and even Ryosuke-kun's soul has been taken by her. If I was nothing but an ordinary girl, what would have made us then? I just want I to be special. And Saito then just like sort of screams in her face like, those are such like thoughtless words, like I won't sympathize with anything you say. Nino just continues now just saying like, hey, President, I'm sure you also hope that I will remain perfect and the ultimate idol forever. And eventually Akane, who's of course been standing in the background listening to Nino say this the entire time, just goes like, hey, I wanted to be normal friends with you. And she just says like, yeah, I mean, that's what Ruby said to me. And Nino just sort of laughs on the ground and eventually just says like, hey, I felt the same way. And eventually Akane just asks the question I think we've all been wondering, like, hey, could you please tell us who on earth made you and Ryosuke Shugano do all of this? And at this point, we get a scene cut to a totally different part of the chapter, but let's talk about all of this Nino stuff and what's sort of going on here. So, of course, the first part of this chapter is a lot of that shock factor of, oh my gosh, okay, Ruby has not been stabbed, it is actually Akane this entire time, but as important of like a cool like shonen moment that is, or I guess seinen, because I think Young Jump is technically categorized as seinen, so this is a seinen manga, whatever, but the whole thing here is Nino and her twisted relationship with Ai, and how that led to suicidal actions and a whole bunch of these other stuff involving Ryusuke. Gosh, I don't even know where to start on this. I probably should have, like, prepared a few notes, because, as you guys know, I do these videos completely off the cuff, and it's not many a time where I just am at a loss for words at what to say about a chapter, because normally, it's a pretty cut and dry thing. This chapter was interesting to me for this reason, it wasn't interesting for this reason, I enjoyed it for this reason, I didn't enjoy it for this reason, and I think this is a good chapter. It does that build up of, here are characters, here is what their problems are, because of course, characters all have flaws, and seeing the disparity here of Nino, as she just says like, hey, my heart has been completely stolen by Ai, and even Ryusuke-kun's soul has been taken by her, sort of showing the negative influence that we know being an idol can bring you. Of course, that negative attention, and of course, that negative attention can turn into negative actions. And it's such a scary thing whenever the panel of Nino in it where she finds Ryosuke hanging from the ceiling. It is so sad and depressing as we see that Nino's stare is the exact same as we've seen it at every other point. Every time we see Nino, we see that she has these eyes that are just like completely pitch dark, that have like just no pupil or anything to them, as we can just tell how engrossed she is in the rage of everything, that she's just so focused and dilated in on her one goal here of, hey, I'm going to get rid of, who's this? I'm going to get rid of Ruby here, no matter what's the cost. She's so engrossed in that feeling of I is the best and nothing can surpass it, that it envelops her up. It's such a, it's a good character, it's a good written character. I have to give it to Aka Sakasa and Mingo Yorki for not only drawing Nino in this way constantly, but also Aka Sakasa for writing this disparity of a human. And the whole last thing here of, hey, I just wanted to be friends with you, and that Nino just felt the same way, that she wanted to be friends with I, but she didn't feel like she could because she felt inferior. It's a lot. Yeah, but at this point we're just going to move on to maybe a bit of a lighter topic, as the next 3 pages or like 3 double pages, like we get 6 total panels here. No, not 6, only just 2. My bad. I thought we had a few more of them. Maybe not. I must be tripping or something, but Either way, we just get 2 panels of all of the Biko no Hachi girls just doing their things in the stadium where they're currently performing. And I find this a little interesting because, of course, we know that last chapter, whenever Ruby came to performance, it was one of those deals of like, hey, I've got something to do on the final day, so I won't be able to make it to the final concert. And we even know that Aqua sort of said the same thing. And this makes 100% sense why now. Is that Akane was acting as Ruby on this day for the whole concert deal. So what ended up happening was she pretty much lied, and the whole joke last time was like, Ruby's like, oh, do you have a new boyfriend, Akane? And no, Akane was just simply going out of her way to protect Ruby. A really nice little moment right there for sure. But we see the Biko no Hachi girls doing their thing. We see all of them are on the stage singing. We see Ruby jumping up into the air doing the idol stuff. Mimcho and Kana just singing into their microphones 110%. All of them acting like friends on the stage. We see that at one point there's supposedly a solo performance by Kana, as we see that she just stands there singing on the microphone, tears welling up in her eyes as she's doing this. And we just see the rest of the girls are also crying, as we see that Mimcho is doing her thing, and she's like crying from joy and happiness of being an idol. And we eventually see Kana, who does the pose that's on the first volume cover of Oshi no Ko, where she sort of got her 2 hands up above her head, and her sort of fingers are up above her eyes, and she's sort of like licking the side of her mouth. Like, pretty much we see that she is doing the idol thing 110%, showing that maybe she is the best idol. But as all of this happens, we just hear the crowd like go crazy, screaming like, "Rah, let's go!" and like just cheering for Biko no Hachi. As we also hear this in the mountains, as we see that somewhere in the mountains there's a sort of built like deck or something coming off the side, like some viewing platform of some kind, and we hear this noise coming out of a phone also. As we see that standing on this pier looking at the phone is none other than Hikaru Kamiki. As Kamiki is just standing there, and eventually he just says like, hey, do you want to watch the broadcast with me? As he looks behind him, and we see that Aqua is standing behind him here. And Aqua is there, sort of emotionless and not really saying much, as he eventually walks up to a bit beside Hikaru and just says like, hey, I've been thinking about how to save you, like just like I said, and like how she wanted me to do. She loved you, thus she wanted you to be saved. But I guess it is too late now. And Aqua just eventually says, Hikaru Kamiki, you're a nasty liar who's been telling lies for your own sake. And we get a little image of Aqua here, as we see that he sort of got like that hood on over his head, sort of like that dark, foreboding personality. But we see that underneath the hood, we see his face, and of course, most of the hair is covering one of his eyes, because of course, Aqua's an emo little fuck. But in the other eye, we see the light Sharingan just sitting there in its socket, right? And eventually, Hikaru just turns around, phone in hand again, and we see that on his phone it looks like the Biko no Hachi concert is still raging on in the background, and he just says, oh, what are you talking about? As we see whenever he turns around, Hikaru has both of the dark Sharingans in his eyes, and he's got this look to him that makes him look crazy and insane. I don't know any better way to describe this look that Hikaru has, but it is one that you look at it and say, okay, this man is not mentally sane right now. He needs some help. But that is where we end this chapter of Oshi no Ko, and golly, this is a crazy chapter. Of course, the chapter title is titled Resonance, which I think mostly comes into the part with Nino, and where she sort of eventually resonates with I wanting to be her friend. At least that's what I take from the chapter title. But this chapter has a whole lot going on. Of course, we get the massive reveal in the beginning of, hey, they were prepared for this. This is Akane wearing a ruby costume, pretty much. And everything's ready. And she just didn't see it coming, right? and Nino eventually on the ground, pinned down by Saito, and eventually learning all of this deep and depravity around Nino. Of course, knowing the knowledge now that, okay, she was actually dating Ryosuke, and of course we know the bad things Ryosuke has done, and eventually going into like the whole thing of, okay, Biko Nahachi is doing their concert, they're doing their concert well, and eventually the confrontation again of Hikaru and Aqua. And if I had to guess, this is probably definitely the climax moment of the Hikaru situation. It seems like Nino has been pretty well dealt with now. We don't necessarily know who these two people are in the background of the image that we see near Akane on page. What page is this? This is page, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think. Yeah, this is page 4. We don't know who this older guy is and who this younger girl is. They could be like some police detectives or something. Doesn't really know, but doesn't really matter, as it definitely seems like Nino has lost her motivation after, of course, not only failing to kill Ruby, but also going through and pretty much just getting talked down by most of the Strawberry production staff here, right? And to that point, like, of course, Biko Nahachi's doing their concert, and that's probably where this is going to end off, while Hikaru deals with Hikaru, or and then Aqua deals with Hikaru in whatever way he is going to be actively doing that. Thankfully, we do not have to wait very long, because, of course, last week, we had a big problem where it was like, alright, Ruby has been stabbed. We have to wait 2 weeks to figure out what happens. No, we do have a chapter next week on the 11th of November of 2024, so that's good. We don't have to wait forever, so I'm actually a little bit happy about that. But yeah, with that, thank you guys so very much for watching. This has definitely been a difficult video to film for many reasons, as I'm sure you guys can tell, because I legitimately don't think I've ever been lost for words on what to say about a chapter, because as much as I like to just sit here and talk about the actions and events in a chapter, yes, that is fun, and that is sort of what I call a manga review. But to really read deeper into this, I mean, recently of course, as you guys know, I am in college now, right? I know, big Glowplasma 231, we're starting a college arc. But recently in a class, I'm actually taking a communications class, and we recently talked about these two different styles of reading. One was called the sponge method of reading, and one was called the panning for gold method of reading, right? The sponge method is pretty much where you just go through and read whatever you're reading as it is, sort of just taking like the surface level depth. Like in this case, you're like, oh, okay, interesting. Ruby has been stabbed. Oh no, it's actually Akane. Saito's here. Wow, that's some pretty sad stuff that happens with Nino. And then going through, okay, Biko Nahachi doing their thing. Oh no, Aqua's here to save the day from Hikaru. Look at that. Well, the panning for gold method really gets in there, and you've got to pan for the gold in all of these scenes to figure out those little nuggets of information and understand these motivations and these character tics. And that is something that I would like to do with these chapter reviews, and this chapter just made it incredibly hard to do that with the content and subject matter. But either way, thank you guys so very much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, I've got other Oshi no Ko chapter reviews on the channel. Maybe not too many more that have been filmed, like literally like 40 minutes after I've been woken up in the morning, but I definitely have other chapter reviews out there, so go check those out if you are at any point so inclined. I'll have a playlist link down in the description, and also the end card at the end of this video, which will probably be showing up any second now, depending on how long I make that stupid thing. If you also did like it, hopefully you won't mind leaving your thoughts on this chapter down below. If you liked how I sort of talked about this chapter, or if you thought I went on some random tangent somewhere you didn't enjoy, let me know down in the comments. If you do like the channel, hopefully you wouldn't mind subscribing. And if you want to contact me more and just like talk about these chapters as they come out, there is the Twitter and Discord link down in the description down below that you can come visit and join our growing community. I think we just hit like 122 subscribers on the channel, which has been more growth in like the past month than I've had in almost the past 6. So either way, thank you guys so very much for watching. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. This will be Glowplasma 231 signing out.